Okay, good evening. We are starting on Bereshis on page 2 in the art scroll, or pretty much any book you open up, it's going to be the same page. We're up to, going to be clearing my throat a few times. We're up to verse 3. So we spoke in the past about God creating heaven and earth, and we want to know whatever that means. The creation of heaven and earth, is it spiritual spheres and physical spheres? Is it also related to everything itself? Heaven itself is the atmosphere. And we said that there was tohu, bo, and choshech. We said in verse 2 that there was a sense of emptiness, and there was a spark that created everything, and the Spirit of God then flowed over the water. So we brought up one of the ideas that said that one of the things that we noticed, that water was never actually created, it seems, or at least in this idea, water doesn't show any level of creation. So we gave a few answers last week. We're not going into that this week. This week we're going to look at the next verses. And the next verse that we're going to look at relate to the essence of light itself. We're not discussing very much Kabbalistic undertones here. There's always going to be a Kabbalistic undertone in all the things that we're reading. But in verse 3, in Hebrew followed by English, Vayomer Elokim Hior, and God said, let there be light. Vayhior, and there was light. Right? This is what we're all familiar with. And Pasuk 4, in Pasuk Dalet, verse 4, Vayar Elokim Es Haor, and God saw Es Haor, this light, Ki Tov, that it was good. Vayavdel Elokim Bein Or Bein HaChoshech, and he separated between light and between darkness. Well, where did darkness come from? Somehow darkness was there before. Yeah, we had darkness in verse 2, and now we have darkness again in verse 4. God saw that this light was good, and we want to know what he did. He created some sort of separation between light and darkness. And then verse 5 in Pasuk Hey, and God called light day, and to darkness he called it night. It was evening, it was morning one day. So somehow we have evening and morning here. What's the necessity for evening and morning?
The sun.
Or the sun. We'll see what that actually is. This is what we're going to look at tonight. This evening, this is our goal. Okay? Let me just skip to this couple of pages that we're going to look at. Any questions so far that you've come up with by looking at these verses yourself?
Well, yeah, you're right. Where did the darkness come from?
Where's darkness from? Okay.
There.
Okay.
And how come he saw the light was good? Could it have been bad or something?
Could it have been bad? Okay. Good. Let's see if we can give you another verse. See, when you look through this, you have to actually study the verses themselves to see how they compare to other forms of creation. So one thing that we note over here is, in God said, Yehi or, let there be light, Vayehi or, and there was light. Let's go another page. Let's turn to the page. If you look at verse 6 and 7, so in English it says, God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, let it separate between water and water. So God made the firmament and separated between the waters which were beneath the firmament, the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. In Hebrew, the end of that line says, Vayi Kain, and it was so. And that's what you have throughout most of them. If you look at verse number 9, and God said, let the waters beneath the heaven be gathered into one area, Vatera Yabasha, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And it was so. He said, let it be, and it was so. Which means it was so means he did what he said he was going to do. Right? God made a command, and the command was snapping his fingers, whatever that means, and that's exactly what it became. Why is that different than on the first page that we saw before? In verse 3, he doesn't say God said, let there be light, and it was so. It said, let there be light, and there was light. So light is a clearly different creation than that of everything else over here, because there's an it was so for everything else, and suddenly for light, which is our initial creation, it's our second creation that we're dealing with, at least on the surface, it's our second creation. And there was light. So what is this there was light that was actually taking place over here? So the first thing we have is that we have a Rashi. We have a Rashi that quotes a Medrash, and there's two Midrashim that we're going to look at tonight. One is, the Medrash says as follows, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar quotes, you don't have it in front of you, but maybe you have in English over there. You might have something. Okay, you'll see it in verse number 4 in the bottom, the second thing that we're going to quote. But before we go there, Rabbi Elazar says, the light that God created on the first day, Adam Tzofa, a person is able to see from one end of the world to the other end of the world. Somehow this light was something translucent, whatever it was, that you had a vision, that you had eternal ability to see whatever you wanted to see. Light just wasn't something that enabled you to see what's in front of you, what your eyesight can show. But the light over here was something that you could see from the beginning of the world until the end of the world. Right? Misofa olam ad sofo, from one end to the other end, which sounds like it's saying that I can see the whole globe. That's what it sounds like. You know if that bus is coming, yeah, it's about 25 miles away. It'll be here, right? That's what it sounds like it's saying. And then when God saw that what was going to happen with the generation of the flood and the destruction that they were going to create, and the people of the Tower of Babel, right, the people of the dispersion, and he saw that they were having destructive ways, what he did was he took that light and he hid that light. This is what he did to the light. He hid the light. So, who did he hide it for? So the Medrash goes on, he says he hid it for the righteous. He hid it for the righteous people for later on.
Is it happen after the sin, or is it happen after the sin, the original sin, or?
So right now it's saying that it has nothing to do with the original sin. It has to just simply do with mankind's free will. That with my free will, I can decide to do destructive things. And therefore this light, which was an original creation, was then pulled back. We're not giving it to you.
But didn't Hashem know the nature of the people to begin with? Why even put the light out if you knew the nature?
Why even create the light if he knows that they're going to be destructive? So what is the point of this light? I'm going to create this light, not for you guys. Sorry, what's it for?
For the righteous, for later on.
For later on. So what do I need to now create it for?
And that's the lights that.
So they have like an idea of where to go. So it'll be like ahead of them, something to be.
So then the question is, what does it mean they're going to have an idea where to go? How do they know? If it's hidden.
Be inserted in their conscious.
But that's
Somewhere in their conscious, they know about this light somehow. So it's not entirely hidden then.
Yeah, a little bit, and they kind of.
So it's not entirely hidden, which is what we're going to look at a lot of the commentaries. They're going to try to take an approach on a simple reading. Simple reading without having to go into Kabbalah, Kabbalistic ideas and other things like that. A simple reading is what we're going to look at.
Is that the light that Abraham is going to see when he gets according to Midrash, right?
So we're going to see all of this, what this light is. That's what we're trying to evaluate for ourselves. What is the light that we're looking at over here? Without having to go into things that are beyond our grasp.
But is the idea is that everything that was created had to be created it's not going to be like created in little parts. It had to be all there, right?
So that's an excellent point you're making. So Elvira is making a beautiful point, and that is that creation itself is everything. The beginning of creation has to be everything that will include the entire world, and not only that, seemingly for the future world as well somehow. We're not sure now if this area of creation is talking about the world to come. That's a whole different experience, and maybe this is not even referring to that experience. But it's something for the future. So what you're saying is correct according to many of the commentaries. The creation that we're dealing with here is a creation that has to initiate on day one and be ready for all future days. We're going to see a number of the commentaries that explain this, and this will give you a totally different way that you ever understood the concept of the creation of the 7 days of creation. Okay? So Rashi tells us, Rashi says, we use a translation over here. You have a footnote over here on your left side on page 3, verse 4 and 5. Rashi says, Af bazu, even in this, we need to come up with a deeper understanding because the simple meaning is very difficult for us to understand. So he says, he saw that the wicked were unworthy of using the light, therefore he set it apart. So if you look at verse 3, God created light and there was light. Verse 4, God saw that the light was good. What does it mean it's good here? It sounds like it's good for the righteous, but it's not good for something else. Right? And therefore he created a separation, says Rashi. He said, God saw that the wicked were unworthy, And therefore, hivdilu, he separated it. When it says over here that he separated this light between light and darkness, Rashi seems to say he's separating it for the righteous people. And darkness perhaps is representing wickedness, evil. The darkness is not a representation of the color of the sky and my inability to see. It's referring to something that is void of goodness, something that's considered bad. But according to the plain sense of the meaning, what does it mean? He saw that it was good, and it was not good that light and darkness should function together. This is Rashi, in a confused manner. Therefore, he created separation of sphere of light and darkness, day and night. This is Rashi's understanding, Rashi's explanation. But the simple meaning is, he created light, it was good. It was so good that I can't create it in mixed with darkness, because that's too difficult for whatever reason. It's too difficult. I don't even know what that means. Too difficult. If we want it to be light and dark, let it be light and dark. Put it together. But it shouldn't be mixed together, and therefore he created a sphere of daytime and a sphere of nighttime. That's what it seems to be.
So
Okay.
without the sun?
So where is the sun in all of this? Well, let's see. If we turn a couple of pages, we'll probably notice that on day 4, on verse 14, on page 5 in our case over here, let there be luminaries in the firmament of the heaven, to make a separation between light and darkness, between day and night. And they will be as signs for festivals and for the days and for the years. And therefore they will serve as luminaries in the firmament of the heaven and on the earth. And it was so. And God made these 2 luminaries, 2 big luminaries. The smaller one for the bigger one for daytime, and the smaller one for nighttime, and the stars. What are we talking about there?
Sun and moon.
Sun and moon. All right? And then he made these things. Then he put them in heaven to shine light into the ground. And then to overtake, to rule on night and day, and to make a distinction between light and darkness. So we see that verse again. Lahavdil beina or beina choshech, to make a separation between light and darkness. And God saw that it was good, and it was night, and it was day. It's the 4th day. So what was that? That's the creation of sun, moon, and stars. So what's happening on day 1 here?
This is just good and bad. This is not light and dark as we think of it.
Well, it says dark, and well, where's good and bad in what we just read?
Oh, it says it said that the light was good.
Right. So somehow there's a goodness of light, and yet in verse 14 through 19, there's no good, bad. There's just luminaries, the sun, moon, and stars.
Right, but I'm just saying that on page 2, it's
Right.
talking about just the evil or the actual bad quality. And
Could
the
be.
good quality.
We're talking about the good quality. We don't say the word bad in this. You only see the word good. We don't see the word bad. We don't see good, right?
What about darkness?
Doesn't say anything about bad.
But
But it's opposite to light. That means it's
A good question. Is it the opposite of light?
Yeah, if it's opposite to light, that is opposite to good.
It's like they say, what's the opposite of this? This.
According to SAT.
Right? What's the is the opposite of light darkness, or is the absence of light?
What's the difference?
In this particular absence of light, it is a darkness.
It's badness because if light
It's
is
a
good,
light,
absence
it is
of
light.
light
Yes,
is
this is
something bad.
constable. Yeah.
Okay, could be.
Logic.
But if we're gonna look like at this first day, we have to probably look like what is created in this day, right?
So what's created in this day? So
And it seems that nothing physical is created in this day. That is not.
well, here's the story. So that's what we're going to take a little walk in understanding some of these things. One is how did that bring? Okay, one is like this. We'll look at a few different views on this of what was actually created on the first day, so we can get a good understanding. Let me see if I can put this in. Is there a logo there? Are you smiling? Okay, so one is that we're going to look at is one of the commentaries on the Torah is the Bechor Shor. So he writes that when God said there was light, you know what that light is a reference to? The sun, the moon, and the stars. So what happened to day 4? You told me day 4 was the sun, moon, and the stars.
It was
So you
hidden.
gotta study the words, right? So God says there was light, vayihi, or and suddenly there was light. On day 4, it says vayas. I'm sorry, what does it say? It says, let there be luminaries in the heavens to separate. And it was so. So we asked this question, what was vayihi, or let there be light, and there was light? So he explains that sun, moon, and stars are actually all created on the first day. There's actually a medrash that says many more things were created on the first day. Let's see if I have it quoted here from the Vilna Gaon. I believe it was the Vilna Gaon that quoted it. It said, no, not there, okay. So he says as follows. The Bechor Shor says that the sun, moon, and stars are created all on the first day, but they were not put up in heaven. They were not put up in the skies until the 4th day. And basically explains as follows. He says, he says, Gemara, he quotes the Gemara. It says, the following things were created on the first day. He said nothing. Mm-hmm. So last week we said what was created on the first day was that spark, which led to everything else that was created, right? Here he says, what was created on the first day was heaven, earth, darkness, ruach, whatever that is, wind or spirit, and light. But the Gemara also adds that tohu and bohu are also creations as well. And so therefore we have a number of things that are created on the first day. We always understood when you read this, it says God created heaven and earth. So it's like a globe and skies and atmosphere. We're seeing that there are many more things created because their first mention is already over here. So he says, now he explains as follows. He says, what God is doing on day 1 is he's basically prepping the world. He's putting all material that needs to be in the world on day 1. And he gives the example, he says, just like someone who wants to build a house, what he does is he goes to Home Depot or Granger or wherever he's going to, Allah Hashalom, right? He goes to a place to pick up all the material that he needs. And then he has all that material, and then he puts it all into place, and he builds the house, and he has the furniture, and he puts it in. So he says, what he does is first is he builds the world itself. He takes the world, creates all the objects that are needed for the world itself, builds the world. After he builds the world, then he populates the world. So he says, if you actually look at the words, the way it's presented, is that on the first day, God created all things that were necessary for the world. And what he did was he created those, and then he put the heavens, the firmament, he created separations, right? And then he enabled the waters to separate. Land is going to be available. And on the 3rd day, what did he do? He moved the waters aside. So there could be a place where fish could be. And continued on and on with rivers and streams. Dries out the land to one side. And then on the ground he enables grass and trees and everything else to grow. So he's building the house, and he's putting he's staging the house so that people can eventually move into the house. And then after he does all of that, he hangs up the luminaries on day 4, right? As if he's opening up the windows. Okay, guys, ready? You want to see the place? Take a look. Let's flip the light switch. And after he finishes building this entire system, this ecosystem, on the 6th and 7th day, that's when it's inhabited. That's when fish come. That's when birds come. That's when creepy, crawly things come. That's when animals are going to come. And that's when human beings are going to come.
5th and 6th, right?
5th and 6th.
Yeah.
5th and 6th. So he says what creation is really happening is that on day 1, all those things needed, the building materials, the building blocks needed for all those days of creation, they're all there on day 1. It's not that the sun and moon and stars are created on day 4. They were created on day 1. They're just put together in order. They created a system of order, is not created that. So that's what happens day 1. So he says, you will find from day 1 to day 5, the word Yetzira, forming, and Bria, creating, doesn't exist. Right? You don't find that word, forming and creating, until you actually reach day 5. And when you get to day 5, it says, Vayivra, God created, verse 21. And God created the large fish and all those things that need to crawl on the ground. He gave him a blessing. And he put all these things there. But when you go to the other areas of creation, let there be these things, and it was so, and it was so, and it was so. It was basically whatever we created on day one, it's now here for you guys, and we're just putting it up together. That's not the way we always understood creation. Here he's saying that in creation itself, everything happens on day one, and then there's the building of the world itself, and then there's the populating of the world, and that's day 5 and day 6. So he says that's a verse in Tehillim that presents a similar idea. It says Vayihi, let there be, basically Vayihi or Vayihi or let there be. That was the creation of everything. Following that became the placement of everything in the world itself. Okay, that's one of the ideas that he presents over here. So when we're talking about the light, we're still investigating for ourselves what is this light itself and what is creation. So we're going to look at another idea that the Kli Yakar explains, another commentary on the Torah, and he explains. We're going to have to look at it for ourselves. The word or, the word light, is mentioned 5 times. Let's go find it. Okay, you're on page 3, 2 and 3. Let's go find the 5 times it says the word light.
Let there be light.
Okay.
There was light.
2.
Light was good.
3.
The light and darkness.
4.
And he called the light to the light.
Day. Right? So 5 times the word light is mentioned over there. Okay, so last time we explained the idea that there was, I think it was on that the light represents the 5 books of Torah, right? Each representing a different idea. Now you're going to go to page, turn the page, please.
Page 10.
You're going to go to page 5. Go to page 5, starting from verse 14. We want to see any other, in English you have it as a luminary, but I'm asking you to turn to the Hebrew side and look at verse number, it's the bottom line in Hebrew. No, even if you can't read Hebrew, it's fine. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4th word on the last line in Hebrew. Top. Yeah. 4th word in the Hebrew. Not there. Right there, you got it. Counting from right to left, right?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Me'orot.
Me'orot.
They're a little,
Bottom line.
Here it is right
Bottom
here.
line, 4th word.
oh, bottom line, fourth one. Okay.
So the word me'orot,
Mm-hmm.
the word me'oros comes from the word or. The mem is from the light. We call a luminary, it's called a luminary in English because it's the thing that gives forth light. That's why it's called that. So if you look from there, how many times are you going to find any relation of the word or from these verses? So you'll count that's 1, and then you turn the page. And you go to the second line in Hebrew. In English you'll find it as luminary. Second line in Hebrew is number 2. And then on that same line, laha'ir, to give light, is 3. And then the next line is 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then 5. Okay? So the word ma'or, and the end of the line is actually the 5th one of ma'or. So that ha'ir is to give forth light. The word ma'or, the luminary, right? There's the big luminary, the little luminary, these 2 luminaries, all these things. It's 5 times mentioned here. So what happens, and this is his proof. If you notice over here, we asked about the creation of light, and we want to know that these objects are created on day 4. So he's going to point out to us it's not true. They cannot be created on day 4. They were created in the beginning on the first day of creation. And therefore he says, everybody agrees that the first light that was created from the beginning of creation was put aside. God saw that it was good. And so therefore he put it away. He created a separation. He put it away between light and darkness. Right? The putting of away, the separation is what Rashi quoted, that for wicked people, they cannot absorb this light, they cannot handle this light, and if they would, it wouldn't be good for them to actually handle this light. So, says the Kli Yakar, that the first day, light was created. It then has to be pulled away, and we'll have to understand what this light is actually happening over here. It's pulled away. On the 4th day of creation, I'm just turning over the page over here, the continuation of Kli Yakar. It mentions the idea of ma'or 4 times. These luminaries, 5 times. What does it mean, me'or? So he says every time you have a word or is light. So if I say me'or, it's from the light.
So it's something that creates light, right?
So there was something that was created in the beginning of creation called light, and then on day 4 there's something that has from that light. but it's not actually the light itself.
So does that mean that it's the first instance of cloning or something?
It's the first time they have cloning. So he says like this. He says, what the luminaries are getting on day 4 are not simply light unto itself. They are receiving light from this what we call the primordial light, the beginning of creation. They're receiving this light that was there. So even though we said he created it and it's going to be for later use, it's actually in use right now. The use that is right now is it's not possible for the human being, for the species of man, to be able to truly receive that light. So what God did was he put these luminaries up. These luminaries are now the absorption of that light, and they're going to give it forth. So a little bit of that light comes from the first day of creation. It is then given over to these luminaries to show that they received light from that, but they don't fully give forth that light. Okay? So that's why it says the word or is mentioned 5 times. Me'or is mentioned 5 times to say that each one of their lights are really coming from that initial light, but it's not. It cannot be the full extent of that light itself.
So is this like the light of the next world?
So that's what it would seem, that it's the light of the next world. But we'll see actually that there's some other aspect to this light. Is it only in the next world that you're actually going to receive that light? So I'll show you that. I'll show you. There's a piece from in the Sefer Ayelas HaShachar. So he quotes in this idea that, let me just see where I saw it. He says as follows. First thing he presents in the Sefer Ayelas HaShachar. This is Rav Nachi Klein Zatzal, who passed away a couple of years ago. So he writes like this, and I was looking. I said I want to find a modern day writer, author, who is a great tzaddik, truly righteous, because at every generation there's going to be a revelation that they'll be able to show that's obviously needed for that generation. That's why they're in that generation. That's why they're writing. So I said, let me open it up to see if he has anything related to this concept over here. So it wasn't necessarily about science, because science, we're going to look at, the Malbim has a few aspects of science associated with it. But he says as follows. He says, that the truth is this light was created so the righteous people can actually appreciate the light and get a divine connection and have the ultimate joy that exists within this world. But God had to take it away. Okay? And so he says Hashem hid that light and created other luminaries, which is what we're talking about on day 4. And he had to create that separation. So he says, is it possible now that had he left it, that the righteous would be utilizing this light and the wicked would not be utilizing this light? So he says, the reason why didn't God just say, you know what, forget the wicked, they'll do their own thing, the righteous will be able to utilize this light, and the wicked, they're not going to have any access to it, or they won't use it. Why don't I just do that? So first answer would be, not the answer he gives, is that light itself is something that we look at it as light, like a light bulb, right? But that light itself has to be something much deeper that they would not be able to handle. So the Medrash says that in the Jewish people, when they were in Egypt, and they had the plagues, so when they had the plague of darkness, what happened in that plague of darkness? It says they were frozen, people were frozen, and the Jews, they had light amongst all their dwellings. So some of the commentaries explain what that was referring to is that God shone that light, this light of creation, on all of Egypt. The Jewish people were worthy of receiving that light, so they could see anything they wanted. And the Egyptians, who were unworthy, they became frozen. It became total darkness for them. It's like if you're standing in front of someone with an LED light or headlights, and you can't see anything. They can see everything, and you can see nothing. You're blinded by the whole thing, right? So technically, they wouldn't be able to withstand that type of light, because that light is coming from a godliness, a certain element of godliness. If you are removed from that godliness, you have no ability to receive that divine light that's coming through. But he presents a question. He says that what God did is, the reason why he hid this light is he does not want the world to be living in this dual structure, in a scenario where the righteous can see the whole world and the wicked can see nothing. He doesn't want that, because that also takes away a sense of your free will. right? Because if you're wicked and you know that the guy next to you and everybody next to you knows everything and can see everything, it's like, hey, I want that. How can I get there? Well, you need to be righteous. Okay, no problem, we'll do it. And for us, whoever is considered righteous and deserving that, they all have no free will to ever want to do bad. Why? Because the light is not just simply I could see. The light is the ultimate goodness. If I always see ultimate goodness, I'll never want to do bad because I'll have that total connection to God and I will have no free will anymore. So therefore God takes that away, to not put it there at the same time. But listen to these words that he says. He says, so at the end of the day, the righteous people are going to lose out. They're going to lose out because there are wicked people in the world, and they're not going to be able to have this, what we call, whatever we're calling, for lack of a better term, this divine light. They're not going to have it. And that's it. However, the Gemara says, as we quoted already, that this light enables us to see from one end of the earth to the other, which sounds like it's saying you can see from beginning of time till the end of time. That's what it seems like it can be. But he says as follows, but you need to know for yourself that the righteous today can see it. The righteous people in every generation, they're actually able to see beginning to end. This is why people go to righteous people for blessings. They can see things that you and I can't see. They can see things that's not related to time. They can see things that they can just see things that you and I can't see. Why? Because the level of their righteousness enables them to connect to this light. He quotes from that Rav Eliyahu Rogler, Zatzal, I don't know who it is, said that if when a person studies the works of the Vilna Gaon, right, the works of the Vilna Gaon in the 1700s, and by studying those works alone, you'll be able to see from one end of the world to the other. That the power of what the Vilna Gaon brought to this world, and a person being able to study that, they'll actually be able to have this divine light enter them. So even though this divine light is hidden and is put aside, number one, it's given over to the luminaries, and number two, a person who has a level of righteousness, they will actually be able to see this. They'll be able to get there in this divine light. So
why is he mentioning Vilna Gaon, not saying like not putting the Vilna Gaon?
Why somebody else, right?
Yeah, why not like
Rashi.
saying like Ramchal, who Vilna Gaon said, I
So
will
again,
study at his feet.
They quote that the Vilna Gaon, what his revelation was, that he was on the caliber of that of the Rishonim, that he was brought into the world in the 1700s, brought into the world, yet his capability and ability of the revelation that he brought was something that was of the likes they had in the 1200s and 1100s, or 1300s and the like. So they say that he was of that caliber. Remember the story we said about the Vilna Gaon, that when they wanted to move his burial plot because of the cemetery, they were destroying the cemetery, so they had righteous people go and move his grave, and they opened it up and they saw that he was intact. His entire body was intact, and then they moved the grave. They had to move it, and every one of those people died out that year. That the light of the Vilna Gaon was so powerful that it was not attainable by anyone in these generations that followed. It was probably 100 years later when it happened. Maybe that's why. I don't know why, but this is what he said, that if a person focuses on that, that's what I can come up with.
When you're saying what are we talking about?
The Vilna Gaon, the Gaon of Vilna,
Vilna.
the Eliyahu of Gaon of Vilna,
But
again.
who's talking about Vilna
He
Gaon?
quotes, this is Rav Steinman quoting from
Stein, okay.
Rav Steinman, who passed away at the age of 103, like 3 years ago.
Recent, like a year ago.
A year ago already?
Like
It's
a little bit more, maybe a little
2
bit
years
more
ago.
than a year.
2 years ago.
think-
I remember him when he came to LA at the age of like
Sean met
93.
him.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's quoting Rav, I don't know who, I'm not familiar with the name, Rav Rugler, Eliyahu Rugler, I don't know who that is. I'm sure also someone of high caliber.
Why don't we have substitution for Steinman? Like Eliashib was before and
Well, first of all, we refer to everyone with a rabbi name.
Rabbi, sorry. Rabbi Eliashib.
We have a Chaim Kanievsky, Okay, so that's the... Okay, so that's one idea that we have with relates to that of the light itself. So the light that we're seeing on the first day is a light that's going to be set aside for righteous at the end of time, and yet it's there. It has to be in the beginning of creation. I don't know about the world to come, but in this light itself, the people who are able to reach this level of righteousness, they're going to be able to see this light. Is this light referring to the light that when people have these out-of-body experiences and they see this great white light? Could be it's related to that. Could be it's connected to that, some aspect of it. So I just want to quote you one idea from the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon explains that it says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, let there be light, Vayehi Or. So he says you're going to understand this concept of the creation of light and the hiding of light is learned from these two words. Let there be light, Yehi Or, and Vayehi Or, there was light. So he says, Yehi is a reference of let there be in the future. Vayehi, and there was, is actually a reference to the past. So he's saying as follows, whenever it says Yehi, there will be light, and then it says there was, it means that there's two functions that actually happened here. It doesn't say and God went and created the light, and God created light, rather just says and there was light. So there's a future tense, and there is going to be a past tense. Because the initial light of Vayehi, there will be light, is actually a reference to the light that's going to be set for the future. Vayehi, and there was light, is the light that's actually set for the present. So the Vilna Gaon has explained that when you read this verse, the verse itself is telling you that there are two types of light created, one for the future and one for the current state. That's what it really is. But again, we already saw some other commentators that are saying that the light was taken, put behind some sort of sheath, and then we say that it was then passed on through the sun. It's interesting to note that we have this concept of the sun in its own sheath. That science will tell you that the sun itself has a sheath, has a layer
Covering.
above it. What is it, the corona?
Like a covering,
Yeah,
What is that?
some sort of covering
like an
on it.
orange peel.
But it's not called the corona, it's called something else.
I mean, yeah, it's got some kind of covering, like an
Right.
orange.
Is that referring to this? It seems to be maybe that if you took that off, that would show greater sense of the light, of that greater sense of light. Scientifically, there might be some sort of connection to that.
Yeah,
That area of
absolutely.
light.
Yeah. The energy that comes within the sun takes 7 years to get out to the outer shell.
What is
Get-
it? Say again?
The energy that's produced, the neutrons that are produced in the middle of the sun, they filter through, and it takes them 7 years to get out to the outer shell. Otherwise, we would burn up.
Uh-huh.
It needs to be filtered.
Okay. So that's so it might be. I don't know if that's actually related to this, the separation of light, but it seems that all the luminaries, and that's why I bring you to the view of Rabbeinu Bachai. Rabbeinu Bachai explains there were two lights. Harishon, the first one is the one that's used in this world, and that's the Or Hachama, that's the sun, and the moon. And the second one is Ha'or Ganos Tzadikim, is the light that's going to be for the future. So there are two lights created. Not like the way we said before. The way we said before is one light created, but then separated. This is saying that from this idea, we're saying that there's actually two lights created. The one that is, and he says the one that is created in this world is actually receiving from the other one. So it's a similar idea of what we said before. Let me just see if I say anything to add over here. So then he quotes like this: Adat haseichel, intellectually, whatever that means. Yehi or vayehi or. There was light. Let there be light. There is light. Or hazeh. The first light is reishis hachidush, the initiation of all newness, and that is called olam hamalachim, the world of angels. That this light is the world of angelic beings, and from that, all other things are created, and from that is shamayim and aretz. So that Vayehi Or is now the spiritual area that we have over here, the world of angelic beings that comes forth, and that we know that every physical thing that exists has a spiritual counterpart in the heavens. So Vayehi Or is, let there be this light, which means the world of angelic beings that are going to then govern over all physical things that exist. Vayehi Or, and there was light. That light is going to be the light that exists within this world. So that is where the creation is actually happening. So Kabbalistically, that Vayehi Or is actually referring to two of these aspects of the light that's created. This is what I wanted to show you, and that is the view of the Malbim. The view of the Malbim is, and he says, we've already explained that in the first moment that God created the world, Nivru kol rivos hakadurim hagadolim. He created the myriads of spheres that are found in Merchave Olam Hasiya, the constellations, the entire universe. So he's explaining now, says the Malbim, that the entire universe, at that first moment the world was created, and what we learned in the first or second verse, that wasn't just simply the world. All of the entire universe of constellations, of whatever you want to call it, Milky Ways and black holes and everything else that's there, was all created during that time. And was thrown out everywhere. V'nitlu kol echad makom. They were all hung in their place, as God chose how to do it then.
That's first day, right?
First day, saying that all of that is happening in the first day. V'hinei kol hakadurim hagadolim. All of these spheres, kadur is a ball. All these spheres, hanikram kochavim, which are called stars, hashaychem legvul kadur hagadol mikulam nikra b'shem hashemesh. All stars correlate to the great sphere known as the sun. So obviously in our case we wonder, is the sun bigger than the other stars? So it seems that the stars are bigger. Perhaps some stars might be bigger, but they're light years away. I don't know.
Depends on the distance.
To our eye, they're smaller.
So to our eye they're smaller.
But
To our
the
eye,
sun
they're
is
small.
one of the smallest, like considered.
Right, but to our
Right.
eye, it's the biggest.
Hmm?
To our eye, it's the biggest.
Because it's the closest. Not even the closest, but
Because
Right. So
can I ask you a question?
yeah, go ahead.
A little off topic, because you mentioned the word tzaddikim. Is it tzaddikim has a common with tzedakah?
Same word.
Is it the same thing?
Tzedek, tzedakah, and
Tzedakah and tzaddikim, and
it's all righteousness. It all means to create.
Righteousness.
When you give tzedakah, you're creating righteousness in the world because you are making the uneven even.
Even. So it's just to create justice.
And that's why a court is called a beit tzedek. It's called a
So
beit
tzedek is a justice?
justice. So really, tzedek really means
Just figure
justice.
that-
Yeah,
Okay.
really means justice.
Just keep, I didn't know that. Something new.
So he says that all of these stars are a sense of darkness, that the sun alone is full of light and puts its light on all the stars. So I don't know how we answer that with regards to stars itself. So I don't want to continue on with it, but he basically saying, "Va'or lo nitan bo ad yom revi." The light given over to the sun was only really given to it on the fourth day. Va'achar shnivra shamayim v'aretz. After the world was created, heaven and earth was created, there was darkness everywhere, right? And then God said, "Let there be light." So he created light itself without putting it into something. He created light which did not have any form associated with it, and then eventually puts that light into the sun itself. And then he says there are sparks of that light that go throughout the rest of creation, and that is the difference between or and ma'or. Like we said before, there's light and the thing that gives forth light. That ma'or, the luminaries themselves, that is the physical thing that can contain the light that is created, and it can then give forth light to everything else. Okay? So that's what he's presenting over here. That light itself is a creation, but it has no physical form. And since we are physical human beings, we need something physical to be able to hold that light, so it can actually give forth the light. That is what the luminaries are presented for us for that reason. At the same time, if you notice that light is set over for tzaddikim, for the righteous people. If it's set over for the righteous people, what does that mean? It means righteous people are getting this light. It doesn't need to actually be physical. So even though the light itself is taken from this primordial, untouchable light, unphysical light, and then given to the luminaries to give forth to the world, that's what we need, that light. Light itself is a physical substance, but the righteous people, they themselves can actually access the non-physical aspect of the light. And that's the beginning of creation itself. Why? Because their level of righteousness is connecting outside of their physical bodies, and as we saw, that their parts of creation are created prior to the physical things that exist, so they can connect to the spiritual side of who they are. They can actually connect to the spiritual light that exists as well for them. And that's why they can even access it in this world as well. That's the key, to be able to receive it and access it in this world itself. So I just want to share a couple of other points over here. Haran Leif Simon does present the medrash that says, Targum Yonas, and that says that when night was created, it was created for the sake of sleep. That's why night was created. That man needed for sleep. He says, if not, then there would be, because that's what he says, here's Erev and Boker, and then when the luminaries are created on day 4, it's night and day. Is that right? Night and day? Right? Laila and Yom. Night and day are created. So we have Erev and Boker. Erev is some sort of mixture that leads to something. And then Boker is also, it's not actual daytime itself, but Laila and Yom are really the actual creations of day and night. Laila was created for people to be able to sleep. So he does wonder, I don't know if he really gives he says, Yesh Medinos, there are countries that have light all day, for many months, right? But most places where people live, it's considered, the more habitable places are those things that actually have day and night to be able to function that way. Nowadays, of course, what do? We have to get artificial light because people are living indoor all the time, right? And they're lacking the vitamin D or whatever else they need from the sun. And then even when it's nighttime, the lights aren't all the time also. So it's like we live in the opposite world. The sun we're not appreciating, and then at night we're not going to sleep. So we live in the darkness in the daytime, and we live in the daytime at night. That is a struggle that we have. We asked the question before, and that is, what is day and night? There's Vahi Erev Vahi Voker. There's no need for us to know about day and night over here. We want to know about the end of the verse number 5. God called this light Yom, and he called the darkness night. That light and darkness he's only going to be putting up on day 4. But that's where it's going to be. Vahi Erev, and it was evening and it was daytime one day. What's the necessity for that? So the answer is something that we've said before. When we look at every day of creation, according to most of the commentaries, it means 24 hours. Don't try to think of it like prehistoric man and dinosaurs and then millions of years. No, this is 24 hours. Every one of these days of creation, 24 hours. We discuss how we're going to deal with dinosaurs. That could be in the first moment of Bereshis Bara. But when the actual days are coming into play, on the first Vayhi or Let There Be Light, that is referring to the 24-hour day period of light. And God wanted to present that to show that in time you will learn what day and night is, and you need to know over here that was the same 24 hours that was created. The same 24 hours you live in is the same 24 hours that that was created back then.
But wasn't? Go ahead.
Where is the explanation of that it's in fact 24 hours? Is it like oral?
So no, the question is when it says that he called day, when he called light, this light he called it day, and darkness he called night. And behold, it was night, and it was day, one day. So we have who cares what night and day? There's no relevance to us night and day.
To us, light and day means 24 hours. Okay, yeah.
For us, night and day is how we deal with light and day. So therefore, he said, there's no relevance in here, there's night and day. Just tell me. And he created day, and he created what he called day and night. And then the next day, he created a firmament. Why do you have to keep telling me that it was night and it was day? It was night and it was day 2. Telling you that those creations were specifically on those days. 24 hours, nothing
24
more.
hours was different
Who says who?
At the beginning.
Who says who?
Well, we know that as time goes by, that one day is going to be longer than 24 hours.
So they quote that from Or Sameach, Rabbi David Gottlieb from Or Sameach, that he went to ask Rav Elyashiv, that he was quoting initially. He used to quote that these days of creation were like, Big Bang Theory, that they were millions of years. Each one of the days is millions of years. Why? We have a pasuk in Tehillim that suggests that in God's world, every day is 1,000 years, right? Why? Because we have the 6 days, 7 days of creation is going to mimic the 1,000 years that we have in the world. 6,000 years of the world are the 6 days of creation. Oh, so it must be that the 6 days of creation are 1,000 years. So no, it's that there is 6 days of creation that will correlate to our 6,000 years, but each one of those 6 days of creation are days unto themselves. So he went and asked Rav Elyashiv, how long can we say that each one of these days? He says, no, each one is a day, 24 hours, not thousands of years. He said at that moment when he heard that from Rav Elyashiv, he stopped teaching that aspect of creation and suggesting that every one of those days of creation were thousands or millions of years.
But
Okay.
24 hours was not the same.
What do you want to tell me? 24 hours was 100 years?
I don't know.
It doesn't matter, it's relative
Our
stuff.
24 hours could have been.
Let me ask you, during Avram's time, what was 24 hours?
Abraham's time was pretty similar to ours.
Why?
So it's 3,000 years ago.
So take 4,000 years ago.
Right, but at the beginning of time, it's different.
So again, so we're answering that and we're saying that the beginning of time, Bereshis bara, that second word, were potentially all the other universes that existed and everything else that happened over time. But when it came to the beginning of actual creating of this world, and God created the heaven and earth, and there was darkness, and he created light, that's 24 hours. That's what he's saying.
Okay, I don't understand the measurement without the sun and the moon being in place.
So again, so on day one, he called, on day one,
He created it, I understand. But it wasn't in place. It wasn't,
Okay, so that you're asking the question, it wasn't in place till Wednesday,
right.
right? Wasn't in place till Wednesday. So guys, you know what time it is? I don't know. Is he gonna plug this up already? I can't wait for him to install this thing. When is it coming up?
Right, just like it says, it wasn't day and night. It was choshech
No, but it says
Boker.
or Yom and Choshech Laila.
on the fourth day.
Day one. Look at verse 5.
I thought it was
I know. Look at verse 5.
boker.
No, look at verse 5.
Okay. V'yir v'yiboker yom sheni. Okay.
No, before that. And God called light day, and darkness he called night. That's on day one he called that already. Saying that actually happened already on day one.
Choshech and Lila. Right? Choshech.
Laila, Chayshach Laila, right?
V'yir v'yiboker.
No, but go back. Vayikra Elokim la'or Yom. And God called or Yom. He called day.
Right.
And he called Choshech Laila. He called it night. And behold, it was one day. So he actually already defined that.
Timing is a very relative thing, it's just like whatever you feel it. You can feel it 24 hours, you can feel it forever.
Right.
It depends.
I mean, right. So that is a question on time itself. How long is time? You can sit in the class; it could be 4 hours long. You can, you can go on a hike. It can feel like 20 minutes.
Right. Well, that's all of Einstein's theory.
Right.
I mean,
It's very relative, that's what it is. So basically we don't know what time, because it's very relative.
right,
Yeah.
but what the rabbi is saying, it's 24 hours.
We just decided, okay, we just assume, then they have it,
Is
24
there
hours.
a machlokas about
This
this?
is the easy
That's what I'm saying. That we used to think that we can translate it as that these
As of
6
today,
days
as we
were
use
millions
now.
of years old. But it seems that the Gedolim of today are saying it's not true. They're 24 hours of creation.
Just because it says.
The way it's presented in light and darkness, the way it's presented in Erev and Boker, that it's literally 24 hours of creation.
Well,
The famous question
my
is that
beef is
the
why
Medrash
say
says-
24 hours?
What?
My beef is why say 24 hours?
Meaning it's the same way that we have a day today. I mean, the Medrash says that when Adam was created, in whichever hour he was created on this hour, and then, he ate from the tree in this hour, and he did this in this hour, and then he was kicked out of the garden in this hour, right? It's like the TV show 24. Like everything's happening in an hour basis, that it's all split up. But it seems like it's all happening in 1 hour increments that everything's happening. So using it, you and I think, okay, Cain and Hell were born in this 8th hour, and then they ate from the tree in the 9th hour, right? Like, it only took an hour? Yeah, it only took an hour. Meaning it's relative, but it all took an hour. Back then, all you had to do is they gave birth to adults already in 1 hour.
And there was a lot of stuff happening. I mean, you got the sacrifices. You have Hashem looking for Adam and Eve and the sin, and
That was a
that's
half
all.
hour.
5 minutes.
It's our calculation, which is estimated. Who knows? Who calculated this?
Yeah, I don't know. Meaning, why do we need the hours? We don't need the hours.
How do-
Meaning, why
how
do
do
we
you
need
know?
to know how many hours are actually involved in the whole thing? Do we need to know how many hours are involved? I don't know. But he's saying that those 6 days of creation are literally 6 days. Maybe things sped up in its time of how they did it, but it was 6 days. I mean, I don't know for me what the,
Hmm.
but it's probably considered like 24 hours. But what does 24 hour represent? It still could be like different opinions, but it could be like it's 24 hours. There is no argument like it could be 24 hours, but the time could be different, whatever it meant.
I don't know.
But still 24 hours.
You know,
The representation is 24 hours.
sorry, I was on yesterday. I saw that. Okay. So that is a general idea. So there was one other thing, and I don't remember where it is or what it is that I wanted to share with you on this. Okay, so with that, let's just close up and just get a little bit of a summary over here. Okay, God saw that this light was good. Okay, the light being good over here is somehow a light that we don't see this really by any other form of creation. There's nothing else that God created. It's like, let's save it. It was only this. Only this light was the only thing that's actually saved for a future time. We saw that Yehior and Vayior is two different aspects of the light itself, of the creation itself. God saw that it was good. So the way we learned it before is that God saw that it was good, so we're saving it, and he created separation. According to other commentaries, if you look on verse 3, and God created light, God said, let there be light, and there was light, which means that he created two aspects of this light, one for now, one for later. But then he said he saw it was good, and he separated. So it shouldn't say that. Right? That seems redundant. He said, let there be light, and he created light, two lights, right? Two things that we have here, the big one, the later one, right? And God saw that the light was good, and he separated between light and between darkness. Somehow it was mixed together. This ability to whether it's referring to good and evil, that's only our own interpretation. If light and darkness were good and evil together, and therefore he separated them, it's difficult to understand what it actually means over here. I take your thoughts on what that actually means. But we'd like to interpret it as, or light being good. But it doesn't. It says, and God saw the light was good. So clearly light is something else.
Maybe light is spiritual and
It has to be some sort of spiritual thing.
Yeah.
But we said it's spiritual that then had to take on a physical form, which was the luminaries on day 4. That's what it was, a spiritual thing. And God saw that the light was good, so he separated it between light and between darkness. Okay? Remember, there was darkness on the entire depth of everything, was pure darkness.
So that's on material world is represent darkness and all spiritual light, isn't it?
Could be, but then why separate it?
Because
According to
they are
that
separated.
terminology, it means that the only way for a person to access the spiritual is to have a pure separation of physical.
It has to be
But that's a
separated.
Christian concept. The Jewish concept is you elevate the physical to the spiritual, right? The Jewish concept is that you have physical,
If
but
you have a spark of this light in you, yes, you can. But if you don't, then you don't.
okay,
But it says it's pretty much we have two big luminaries, one for the night and one for the day, and they're still stars, right? The luminaries too. So they're stars, but they're not really affecting us. We'll just see them, but there is no effect.
Yes, we
They're
are
not-
affected by them.
No, we're
Exactly.
affected by stars, but they're not producing light, any light that we can actually use.
utilizes it. He's saying, yeah, we're affected by stars, meaning constellations, but the light of the stars itself we're not really utilizing.
And by itself, moon is not producing light. It's a reflection of the sun.
We are actually utilizing sun.
No,
Sun, he's saying stars were not.
stars we're not,
Ah.
but sun we are. So we have star, moon, and
The
and
initial
sun,
light. Sun,
and,
right.
and we have stars. Stars we can put out of the sequence because we're not utilizing anything. So we have only two, sun and a star. I mean, sun.
I
and the
wonder
moon.
this, I just want to end with this, but I wonder the following point. When are stars relevant to us in Jewish life?
Well, Abraham's counting,
Abraham's counting, you're going to be like the stars.
right?
Okay, so what's the
Well,
relevance to that?
astrologically, I mean.
Astrologically,
Astrologically, yeah.
Okay.
That we are not affected.
so astrologically it also means something spiritual is governing over our physical life. You're going to be counted like the stars, which means somehow in the world of spiritual, right?
Uh,
What else is stars relevant to us?
When we consider like the beginning of the month and the end of the month.
Beginning of night and day, right? What is the one thing you do in order to make Havdalah? In order to make,
Yeah,
right?
stars, looking for stars.
So in order to create a separation, Havdalah separation, to create a separation between Shabbos and weekday, between holy and mundane, is where you actually need the stars. So that light is actually necessary for us. It's not enough to have the light of the moon, nor the light of the sun. You need the light of the stars in order to create that. So there is relevance to the light of the stars that we have. Right? The light of those stars are giving us the opportunity to separate between holy and unholy.
And that's the same when the Kohen leave the room, right? They have to wait for 3 stars.
You have to wait for three medium-sized stars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they have to see.
But
3
that
stars.
light is coming from where? Where's the light of those stars coming from? The stars themselves?
From complete darkness.
From complete darkness, maybe?
Like not
right?
complete darkness, consider there is no sun.
But there is a relevance that it's just interesting that there is a relevance to the Havdalah, that separation. What separates my holiness from unholiness? When I can actually see the light of the stars. So I don't know what that fully means. Okay, but this is what we're talking about here. We have light. We're trying to uncover a little bit more of what light is about. And light is going to be something that there's 2 creations of light. It's going to be separated, at least according to many of the authorities that we saw. It's going to be separated. The tzaddikim will be able to access the light throughout the generations. The spiritual light they'll be able to get to. The unrighteous will not have any access to that light. They're just going to have luminaries. They're going to give forth sun and moon and stars, physical things, because those physical things need to take in this spiritual force of light, which is purely spiritual. But the righteous person can actually access that level of spirituality. And then day and night are actually created on these 2 days. That's what we're seeing from these verses over here. So for those of you online, we're going to be stopping right now and for tonight. Thank you. How do I stop this? I press finish.
Square.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Rabbi Klein, where does the astrological? I remember during one of the classes.
Yeah.
During one of the classes, during the online learning.